Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Station 11, Episode 10. It's called Unbroken Scircle. So spoilers for the episode. It is the series finale, and this is a Patreon-sponsored series, so thank you to Alison for picking this show. I got the shirt and the tie on, I got the sleeves rolled up, I'm ready to work. Actually, the sleeves are rolled up because I'm very warm, and this shirt is not helping. But we're here to talk about the finale of the show. And what a roller coaster of reactions I was having as I was watching this episode. If you remember, dear viewer, last episode I said that the thing I cared most about, and I didn't necessarily think they were going to do anything with it, was Jeevan and Kirsten meeting each other again, right? Reuniting, having that moment. And of course, early on in this episode, they show Jeevan as the doctor who's coming to check on Clark after he gets some burn damage from the fire from the tower from the previous episode. And I was like, oh, okay, they're actually going to do it. They're setting it up. They're going to do the thing that I was asking for. So if nothing else, if everything else falls flat for me, I'm at least going to have that. And then the bastards did the whole ships in the night thing, where Jeevan's looking at the poster, he's about to leave, and Kirsten just kind of walks in the background, and they don't see each other, right? They just miss each other. And it had me convinced. I genuinely thought that was it. And that they weren't going to reunite, they weren't going to see each other. And it was going to be this thing where, like they were never meant to see each other again. They've both went on their own journeys, blah, 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 blah. And I can see the argument in stories in general for that being the right outcome to something. But as I said, that was the thing I cared most about, so I was a little bit annoyed. I went into a bit of a mood for several scenes after that moment. Of course, though, they were just playing with me. They were playing with the audience. They knew what they were doing here. They wanted to tease the idea that it wasn't going to happen, so that when it does happen out of nowhere towards the end of the episode, it's quite a big moment. And it is. Like, it's a genuine moment where I thought even, like, she was going to recognize him, but he wouldn't recognize her immediately. But he does. Like, he's actually looking at her before she's even looking at him. He can tell who it is, and they have this moment where they walk towards each other, they stare a little bit, and then ultimately hug, and the music's going all emotional, and it's probably the most heartfelt moment I felt in the entire show. I was into it. I was into that moment. I'm glad that the final scene of the episode was them saying their goodbyes. Not necessarily forever. They even, make plans to come back to the airport in a year and do their show in the circle and all that, and that he'll bring the family to come and see them next time. But she does get to say goodbye. And notably, after she says bye at the very end of the show, she says it a second time, which is a callback and kind of a payoff to this idea that she struggled and with the idea that she never got to say goodbye to her parents, she never got to say goodbye to Frank. That whole flashback episode where she was kind of living through it with the drug in her system was about her finally getting to say goodbye. And I think she says goodbye once, and then she realizes, oh, that felt good. It's great to be able to actually say it and have a bit of closure to at least this time we meet, right? Until next time. And she says it again, and it's kind of sweet. When they go down the forks in the road as they're going past near where he lives. So, yeah, I have really no complaints about that. It's also interesting seeing them interact now that it's the adult version of Kirsten, because obviously up until now it's always been the kid version, which is maybe the one kind of just broad sad thing about this final episode is that it goes out of its way to like let us see a lot of the characters again. Like even Miranda gets a little subplot in the flashbacks that reveals a little bit more about her final night before she seemingly passed away. And it was nice to see Miranda again because she was such a big part of the show, and not in terms of time, it was really just that one episode, other than a couple other scenes. But she was such an important part of like getting the whole show going and such an important backbone to the show that it was really nice to give her a send-off here in this final episode. And in a weird way, the one casualty to that, I would say, is young Kirsten, purely just because we have old Kirsten, and it means that we don't get to have like a proper goodbye to the younger version. I know that sounds strange. It's really just a case of like liking the actor and liking that performance, and her not having like a good moment in the finale because we're just giving it all to adult Kirsten is a little bit of a shame. Because I think young Kirsten and Jeevan's like friendship and like relationship was the most engaging part of the show. But like I understand why it's not there. I understand why it is the way it is, because obviously we have the adult version, but it would have been interesting to maybe somehow get a little flashback in or something that could have been a nice little goodbye to that version of the character as well. So yeah, well, I mean, the rest of the episode, like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about obviously them doing the play. We're talking about the fact that Kirsten kind of engineers it as the director of the play to finally let Tyler and his mother and even Clark at a certain point work through their issues by acting out a scene from Hamlet. And everyone's kind of reluctant to get involved at first. First Elizabeth, because she wants to direct, then Tyler. But then when Elizabeth sits down to read lines with him, because they've got him locked up in a room, he kind of like opens up to it a little bit more. I think the most interesting part of this whole journey to the play, though, was probably the scene where Clark ultimately says that he's going to be involved. He's not asked to be involved. He puts himself into it, which I think worked for the character as well, because a big part of like his role in the backstory with the other characters is that he was the friend of Arthur, but he wasn't really part of the family. So he kind of, even at the start of the airport stuff, he kind of had to like insert himself into a prominent role. No one gives him a prominent role. He has to take it for himself. So he says, I'll play so-and-so, and it becomes like all three of them in the play. But I like that scene, not just because that was a really good move for his character, but because of what convinces them to even go through with it, is that she whips out the book. She whips out Station 11. She says that she tried to kill Tyler, but couldn't. And when they ask why, she whips out Station 11, and I think it's Elizabeth that says, oh, did Tyler give you that? And she says, no, Arthur did. And that obviously, like, I like this moment because it gobsmacks both of them. They were not expecting to hear that she knew Arthur in this moment, right? That it hits them like a truck. And they're like, wait, what? And she explains who she is, that she was in the play at the start of the show, and Clark remembers her, remembers the nickname she had, and is, kind of awestruck by it. It's almost like the fact that she's even here feels like a bit of a miracle, and it's kind of like inspirational in a sense. But yeah, ultimately, this idea that people have to like actually get through what they're feeling, and whether that's saying goodbye or letting go of something, is ultimately what happens in the play. And the big main theme from episode 7, Dr. 11 comes back as they're acting out the play. And right before the start, Alex, for some reason, has given the knife that Kirsten gave up. Kirsten kind of gave up her weapons to sort of show that she changed. And Alex gives that knife to Tyler. So during the play, Tyler whips out the real knife, and everyone gets kind of tense. And people are maybe going to intervene, but Kirsten kind of holds them back and says, let it play out, right? She kind of has some faith, wants to have them work out their issues. And there's a couple of lines in this episode that kind of stuck the landing, I would say. And one of them is Tyler's holding the knife out to Clark. Clark says, I loved him too. And that's ultimately the final thing before Tyler drops the knife and doesn't go through with killing him. And that very much felt like, to me, kind of like, Tyler finally in some respect understanding how Clark felt at some point in his life. And then maybe this idea that also that Elizabeth says, hey, I would have went with you. I mean, you faked your death so that I couldn't like have a proper goodbye or whatever. But like, if you had just said you wanted to leave, I would have left too. And I think hearing that is a big deal to Tyler as well. So yeah, that's kind of where those characters end up, is that she is leaving with him and all the kids at the end. I think the weird wrinkle about this entire plot, though, that I've had an issue with since like episode 4, whatever it was the idea of the children in the mines and the suicide bombings, and that's kind of teased that it might happen here. And I think there was an explanation where it wasn't Tyler who ordered the bombings to happen, but the way that the characters just never really treated it like it was a big deal in the show, past the very initial shock, always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And it coming back in here as a threat was a bit strange for me. I mean, I do like that Kirsten's able to like talk the girl down and kind of like reaches out to her and becomes that girl's like person, right? A big theme of this episode, and the show as a whole to an extent, I guess, but specifically of this episode, is the idea that if you have someone to help you through, if you have someone you can rely on, right? And there's a moment where I think Jeevan's saying it when he's talking about being at Sarah's bedside as she was dying. You see a quick flashback to him and Kirsten, and it's just this little idea that as long as you have someone and they're there for you, and Tyler in many ways kind of robbed himself from that by shutting himself away from everyone, but he's managed to be there for a lot of kids, and Kirsten now is reaching out and actually gives or at least lets the girl see the book and sort of goes through it with her and says, no, it's not a prophecy that Tyler gets in his head. It's from this book, and reads it with her. The girl ends up stealing it and running off with it a little bit later, and Kirsten almost chases after her but chooses not to. Perhaps realizing the girl needs it more, right? That this group of kids are going to get more out of that now, and it'll help them grow into better people or something. But I think Kirsten realizing to not fight the girl, not that I was expecting a fist fight, but more to reach out and be a guardian, to reach out and teach her something, to show some empathy, to show some compassion, and try and guide her in a way that Jeevan was there for her. Like, that made sense to me, and I did like that payoff to kind of like where her character has been throughout the show. I think, a lot of my dislike of the Traveling Symphony stuff and the Prophet stuff is just that Tyler's character, especially the kid version, was just never all that compelling to me. And then also, like, the big complaint I'd have about this episode is that we do have to sit through quite a long Hamlet scene before it gets to the meat of it and like what it's really there for. And I'm sure the scene itself has tons of subtext that relates to the story of the show and indeed the original book. That's all fine and well, but I'd be lying if I said I was actually comprehending a lot of what they were actually saying when they were just doing the Shakespeare talk. But regardless, like the point of the scene by the end, and it's they've got a fancy spotlight here because the airport's got electricity. They've got all these outfits that they've made. It really feels like the generations moving on in a lot of ways, because even the old like fake space helmet that Kirsten had as a kid, I don't know if it's the exact helmet, like, or someone's just made a new one, but you see one of the kids at the end that's going off with Tyler, and there's a lot of kids. Like, he's got a lot of kids that are traveling with him. Clark kind of is in awe of how many people are with him. So, yeah, I mean, it ends in a good place for them where he says, don't be strangers. The idea being that they're welcome back. The Traveling Symphony seem to be welcome back. And, yeah, Kirsten and Jeevan, find out about each other's lives a little bit. And then the other line that I was saying earlier, along with I loved him too, from Clark, I think the other line that kind of worked really well here was Kirsten saying to Jeevan, because Jeevan was sort of describing like how their story started and saying, he was supposed to walk her home, and Kirsten said she was never scared of him, but he said he was constantly scared, not of her per se, but the idea that he was going to fail, that it wasn't going to be enough, that he was going to fail this girl that has now become his responsibility. And Kirsten just says, you did walk her home. You walked her home, implying that he got her where she needed to be, that he completely achieved like what he needed to achieve to make sure she was going to be okay. And it's kind of a touchy moment between them at the end of the episode. So yeah, that's also pretty good. As far as the other stuff goes, like the flashbacks with Miranda, which kind of reveal that she kind of saved the airport effectively before she died, because Clark calls her, or she calls Clark, one way or the other, and she gets sort of the information of like, okay, they've been diverted, they're in this airport, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, there's only one road towards the airport, so as long as no one at the airport's sick, they might be okay. But later on, when she's with the other guy, she opens the door up, and the guy that she was traveling with is with her, and she's trying to get more information on it. She finds out that another plane has landed, and we knew about this plane. This was the plane full of the infected people. And we find out that she actually goes through the effort of getting the phone number of the captain or the pilot, I should say, of the plane, and calling him, and basically begs him to not let anyone off the plane, because they're already dead, they're already sick, and they don't deserve to die like that, because that's what the pilot says. Like, these people don't deserve to die in a cage. And she's like, no, you're right, they don't deserve to die in a cage, but you'll be saving everyone else by doing it. So this idea that she had this moment of influence right before the end, right? And there's some great visuals as she's seemingly dying, where she like meets up with a spaceman, and the spaceman takes her onto Station 11, and she's like climbing. You know, it's visually quite different from everything else in the show, so it really sticks out as a nice visual to sort of leave us on. The idea that in the end she gets to go to the fantastical place that she wanted so much, and I think also it kind of like ties into Tyler's story a little bit, where she says, you know, we get a little bit more of the conversation with Arthur, where she gave him the book. Again, we've went back to that scene numerous times throughout the season, but here we get a little bit of the conversation where she says that she's finished it, but she wishes that she was able to do it sooner, that she wishes she was able to finish this before she drove everyone out of her life, including Arthur, including everyone else that was around her. And this idea that she had to go through this journey on her own, which was very lonely, to finally get to this point to finish her arc, right? To get to that end point. And that's kind of like Tyler, where he had to sort of like, he put out everyone around him, his mother, Clark, the airport people, and he went off on his own. And it's not until now that he's finally realized that there's value in those relationships. And Miranda seemingly found that, as far as Arthur's concerned, at the very end of the show here, or the very end of her life, I should say. Like she seemed to know that in that last day or two before she died, that she had regrets, that she wanted more. And there was even this hope that she might rekindle things with Arthur. But that's not there anymore, right? Because he's dead. And now she's going to die. So there's a very melancholic tone to a lot of this episode. But at the same time, it's also very hopeful, which is kind of what the show has been. And at times, maybe even a little bit too hopeful. Like, I almost think that some of the middle episodes could have been a little bit more sinister or darker, so that all of this, like, hope triumphing at the end would have landed even harder. But like I said, the Kirsten and Jeevan stuff, by and large, really worked quite well. I like the Miranda stuff at the end of her actually trying really hard to save someone, or save everyone, really, at the airport. Particularly when she compared it to when her family died, and a hurricane caused a flood in her house, and because a live wire like ended up getting in, the entire family electrocuted except her, because she just happened to be on the table drawing. So she was actually on the table doing art, which is ultimately what the book is, right? It was like the early days of her discovering that passion and doing that, and it kind of saved her. So in a weird way, it turns out that her imaginary Dr. 11 did save her, right? Because she was on the table drawing him, or something that would become him, when her family died. And she describes everyone in that airport as being sitting on the table to the pilot. I thought that was a really nice way of putting it. Yeah, that stuff is good. I mean, looking back at the show as a whole, and sort of thinking about how I've felt throughout it, like, I definitely think the season is a mixed bag overall, but I can't deny that there's definitely single episodes, or even just single scenes or ideas, that have resonated quite a bit and have stuck with me after I've watched the show, or pieces of music that have stuck with me and I've thought about them. But there's also a lot of things in the show that I'm less enthusiastic about, and it's been a real up and down journey because of that. And it's weird. It's a very funny thing to critique a show like this, where you do feel such push and pull depending on what's on the screen at any given time. Because, you know, some things I'll watch and I'll just think it's all miserable, or I'll think it's all great, or whatever, right? Usually it veers more towards one than the other. This is a very strange case for me, where like half of it I think is pretty much great, even bordering on excellent, and then the other half just leaves me kind of sitting twiddling my thumbs going, what is this? Like, I think, I mean, this episode, if we're counting this, and I guess we would, as the present day timeline, is the best of those episodes by far, because it has a lot of culmination in it, and it has a lot of payoff to things. But the last couple of episodes that were in this part of the timeline, episodes, 8 and 6, were easily where I was at my lowest as far as the show goes, where those episodes were legitimately a bit of a chore to get through, because I just wasn't that interested in like meeting more of Tyler and his group, or Kirsten's investigation and like finding them and all that stuff, or her reaction to these people at the airport and everything they were doing. Like, you know, I almost would have liked maybe more of an audible moment from Kirsten where she kind of admits she was wrong about this place, because last episode she was, or not last episode because that was the flashback episode, the one before that, she was like adamant, like, oh, they're keeping us prisoner, this is awful, we have to fight our way out, kind of thing. And it's actually kind of nice that obviously she's proven wrong in this episode, but it would have almost been nice for her to kind of like say that or admit that to someone that mattered or whatever. But I guess the important thing though is that she does reach out and tries to kind of in her own way through a play help them, because after all her time with Frank ended with a performance. And once again, she's trying to resolve the issues that these people are going through with a performance where they can say things they would never feel comfortable saying otherwise. So it's definitely a little bit on the nose at points, and it's definitely, there's a lot of connections in the show. There's a lot of, like, something as simple as little young Tyler running into some characters last episode, or people meeting each other again and stuff like that. That said, though, in this final episode, that actually becomes a major theme of the episode, because I actually really like this when Kirsten's explaining why the traveling symphony travel and they don't just stay in one place and let others come to them. Is she says that it's because we come back. That's the point, is that we leave and then we come back. And it's this idea that everything in her life didn't come back, right? She lost her family, there was no coming back. She lost Jeevan, there was no coming back from him. Frank even as well. So the idea, at least to her, what the symphony means to her, is that she gets to always fulfill the promise of coming back somewhere so that the people can be thankful to see them again. And in a lot of ways, this final episode is like, yes, she finally got to see Jeevan again. He came back. It's kind of a miracle. Tyler's back with Elizabeth and Clark. That's kind of also feels like kind of a miracle, because they spent so long thinking he was dead that he'd burned himself alive. So that core idea of coming back is a theme that's really in here. And just it says a lot that she values that in some way, because it was so missing in her life up until a certain point. And it made it was understandable why she was so desperate not to let people leave or lose anyone, because she has lost too many people and it's too much to take. That said, though, as much as I say that, I still didn't like any scene she had with Alex, pretty much. And maybe it's just because Alex is kind of a whiny teenager and it's all very one note, but I never felt myself engaged in that, even though thematically I understand why the character has a problem with letting people go. And she does let Alex go in this episode. She kind of accepts it at the end that she's going on her way, and she does. She goes off with Tyler and the kids, and they're going to do whatever they're going to do. But, it never made those scenes entertaining to watch, or maybe entertaining is not the right word, depending on because they're not necessarily happy scenes per se, but I just never enjoyed that conflict, even though I understood why Kirsten felt the way she did from a character perspective. So, it's things like that stop it from completely working for me. But I will say that all the flashback episodes, by and large, were very good, right? Like, one, which is Jeevan and Kirsten, the start of the story, the walk home, the start of the apocalypse. 3 was Miranda, which was pretty exceptional. 5 was the airport, and that was very good, other than maybe some of the Kid Tyler stuff. 7 was the Frank apartment episode, and that was good. I think I was a little less enthusiastic on it as I watched it, because I just because of like knowing we were going back to the next episode. But in hindsight, I think it is a really solidly put together episode. I think episode 9 is arguably the best episode of the show, which is the Jeevan, What Happened to Him episode. I think those were all excellent. For me, I just wished that the other half of the show, the present day stuff, I at a certain point, I think you just have to completely rewrite it. Like, it's not so much that there's just some things that were a little bit off for me. I just don't think I'm that interested in what they were doing with it for the most part. Even though I can look at it and analyze it and say, all these themes were there, all these ideas of saying goodbye in one way or another, of preserving the history that we had before, and is that healthy, is it not healthy? Should we move on fresh and not think about it before? Like, those ideas are very interesting to me, and I do like all those themes. I was just never that compelled with the Traveling Symphony and the Prophet, like, and the threat of the Prophet. That stuff was less exciting. But, you know, all things considered, I'm not mad I watched it, certainly. I think it was an interesting watch. At the very least, it feels like one of those shows that's going to be in the zeitgeist in that sense. Not in like a super mainstream way, but like when people are bringing up shows from the past 5, 10, 15 years, I feel like there's going to be a really rabid fan base that are always going to bring this up. And I'm at least glad that I gave it a shot and tried it and can at least say why I don't consider it to be as great as other things that I do think are more special, or more, or at least work more for me, if nothing else. But at least I get to understand it. I get to know what the show was, and I get to like be informed when I say, no, I don't think that belongs in the top 10 of the decade or whatever it might be. So regardless, yeah. I feel like, this was very much an episode of culminations and the payoffs. If I probably skipped over some of the build up to some of that stuff because honestly, by the end, all I could think about was how everything ended. But hopefully my musings over the course of the season have been somewhat interesting. But that's my thoughts on the Station 11 finale. And I will be back in a couple of weeks with whatever Alison's got for me next. I think I have an idea of what it may be, but I don't know for sure, so I won't say it, just in case. So thank you very much for joining me. You can, of course, support all the content by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting over there for however much you can afford per month. It helps out. It's much appreciated. You can also do it via YouTube membership if that's more your thing. Any support helps keep everything coming, keeps the content rolling. It's what lets me be able to do this as consistently as I do, both on this channel and over on the movies channel. So thank you very much for any support. You can like, subscribe, comment below and tell me what you thought of the show. All those things help out as well. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?